Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of FinServ Tech Oracles. I'm Johna Johnson here with my oracular colleague, Jerry Murphy, to share our thoughts on technology for financial services firms. Jerry, for this episode, you wanted to discuss the SEC's cybersecurity materiality requirement. And just as a reminder, last month marked the first quarter that many financial services firms had to file their materiality clauses as part of their quarterly filings. The SEC requires registrants to disclose cybersecurity incidents that are deemed material, with no precise definition of material. It's kind of, you'll know it when you see it, leaving it up to the cybersecurity team, the chief risk officer, and a legal team to sort everything out. So let's just start with my first question. For CISOs, this is akin to an unpinned grenade. If there's a material cybersecurity incident or an undisclosed risk, there are personal repercussions, lawsuits, and potentially, as we've seen, even jail time. So what should CISOs be doing?
Oh, well, it's very easy. The very first thing you should do is, when in doubt, report the incident. And my only other thing I'd say after that is to the chief risk officer. So I think the job of the CISO is sit there and identify any potential event that you think, let the chief risk officer know. And it's probably their job to figure out, okay, for all of the risks, not just IT risks, here's all the risks companies taking, financial risks, business risks, and of all those things, it's probably their job to actually figure out, what is reportable versus not reportable. But I would say the CISO really should be when in doubt, report it. You're going to get in far less trouble reporting something than not, but that's where I would go.
Well, and I just want to also add to that, don't just report, but as we've seen, when they push back on the pushback. One of our clients actually filed his whole materiality clause and the quarterly filings, sent them to legal. Legal cut half the stuff out, kicked it back with a bunch of questions from the risk officer. And his response was, well, the answers to those questions were in what legal just edited out. So let's sit down, have a come to Jesus moment, and everybody review this. And when he concluded, the whole thing was twice as long as when he sent it in, because all of a sudden legal and the chief risk officer were like, arr!
Yeah, but I think it's important to have that stuff documented, so that way, whether the SEC or the FBI or any agency comes to say, why didn't you let us know about X, Y, or Z, at least you as the CISO can say, I did let management know about these issues. So
exactly. And that was in fact his exact response. His response was literally, okay, here's my email with everything you've cut out. I am saving this. I am sending this to you. And by the way, if you persist in cutting it out, I will be hiring my own counsel. And they went, oh, maybe not. So that's what brought them to the table. So yeah, I guess the message is document it, take it seriously, and have your own counsel in your corner, because this could get very real very fast. Yeah. Very specifically, what else about third-party risk? Because that's the other new thing in the SEC's requirement. What can CISOs be doing to better manage that?
And this is one of these challenges where there's, as we've talked about, turtles all the way down, right? It's like, I want to make sure my third parties are obeying these laws, but then they themselves are using third parties. So like, where does my accountability end? So at a minimum, to me, what you need to do with your service providers is insist on getting sort of two things. One, monthly activity reports showing all incidents, regardless of whether they're reportable or not, just so you can see what's going on. And I would also insist on getting their compliance reports. So I need to see what it is that you are submitting, just so I can make sure when the auditors come and ask me what's going on with these third parties, I can say, well, this is what they told me they are doing. So again, you've got some protection in terms of, I've insisted on these things. They're giving me the reports, and I have them available to show to you if I need to. And you can't go forever, right? Because like I said, it's this recursive thing. It's practically impossible to get them to say, give me your reports from your people, and they need to get your report. I mean, it never ends, right? So I think going to your first reports, getting theirs is about as far as you need to go.
Right, because the assumption is that they're doing their job and they need to report it. And if not, you can at least prove by doing what you've recommended, that they did not, in fact, report it. So just to reiterate, because I think this is incredibly important for folks. Number one, make sure that you get a monthly list of incident reports, material or otherwise, and that you review this. So you've got it, you've reviewed it, and they sign off on saying these and no other incidents have occurred. That's what's happened. And then the second thing is that you get a copy of their materiality reports. Exactly. Now, that raises my last point, which is actually kind of interesting, which is if they are not a public company, the SEC requirement doesn't cover them. But CISA has its own set of requirements that it is looking to push across all organizations, whether public, private, not-for-profit, et cetera, which requires very similar reporting of material incidents within a very tight time frame, but again, with the air quotes around material. And one of the fun things here is that there's absolutely no guarantee that CISA and the SEC are going to even remotely agree on what comprises a material incident. But the reason I'm bringing this up is if you're listening to this and going, hey, we're a hedge fund, hey, we're a private equity firm, hey, our providers are not public, therefore we will not be getting any of this reporting because they're not required to by the SEC, think again, because CISA is now going to mandate that very soon. And you can use that and leverage that to get those reports that you were just talking about, Jerry.
Right. And I would get to the point where if your service provider is so cocky as to say, oh, well, I'm private, I'm not subject to reports, well, then I would simply say, well, if I can't get those reports from you, I'm going to find a service provider who will give me those reports.
Which is kind of lurking around the edges of what you've said is essentially what this does is force private providers to behave like public ones for the purposes of cybersecurity, or risk losing to their public counterparts who have the advantage not only of greater capital and greater marketing, but also now the fact that they can actually provide documentation that's necessary.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, that's just smart to do, Johna, because I was a CEO of a private company. I honestly ran it as if it was a public company. So I didn't have to adhere to a bunch of these financial compliance standards. I adhere to them anyhow, because I thought, if anybody, and it comes to find out when I went to sell the company, it was a good thing I did because it made it very easy to track our finances, and our company ended up selling for, twice what my parent company thought it was going to go for, just because I took the time to do that. So I would say, even if you're private, it still makes sense to run yourself as if you're a public anyhow.
Which I think is a great last word. And if you're listening to this and you're a private service provider of any sort, words to live by. So with that, thanks very much. That's it for us until next week. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. You can register for the entire series online. Please do. That way we know who our audience is. And of course, tune in next week at 0900 Tuesday, right before the market opens, for the next episode of FinServ Tech Oracles.
Have a great
Thanks,
day.
and thank you, Jerry.